from the Jefferson County Commission, President Pasha Majdi, or Majdi, as some say.
Majdi or Majdi, Mario or Mario, two birds of a feather.
Same thing, right?
Cara.
Yeah. Cara Keys, the Vice President of the Commission. Good morning to you.
No Vice President, just a Commissioner.
Oh, I thought you were Vice President. I'm sorry.
Mike Mood, I give him that.
Yeah.
That's right. My apologies. Well, good morning to you.
Thank you.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Both of you. Now, in the first segment, Steve Pearson from the West Virginia Independent Observer was in. He was talking about the bottling plant decision. I know legally you guys can't say anything about this or much of anything, if at all, but if there's any comment you can make, now's your chance and your turn to make it. If you can't, don't get yourself in trouble with your attorneys. Just say, sorry, we can't comment. I'm not here to get you in trouble, but if you have a comment, now's your time to make it.
You want to bite on that, or you want me to go first? I'll go first.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would not comment on the application.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the county commission, not the planning commission. The planning commission received the application. They weighed the pros and the cons. They made a decision in accordance with the law. I'm on the county commission. They both have commission in the name, but they're very different. Mm-hmm. So I had no decision on this whatsoever. All I'll say is I backed the planning commission 100%. It was a unanimous decision. Commissioner Keys made the motion. It was decided unanimously. So obviously they know what they're doing, and it was a good motion because it was a unanimous decision. Generally speaking, we want clean water, and we have asked our Department of Environmental Protection, State Department, to come in and brief us on water quality generally and water quantity studies specifically. We've asked them to do that because the state owns the water in West Virginia in accordance with West Virginia law. State owns the water, state regulates the water, state regulates water quantity and water quality. So we've asked for a briefing. We asked for that before this planning commission decision. Mm-hmm. We've written them a letter. We're waiting for feedback. We'd like to have them come into a county commission meeting and brief the community so they're familiar with what the state's doing there. And then the last thing I would say is, the reason we're probably not going to talk all too much about it is because there might be litigation on this, which you probably talked about with Steve Pearson. And I would hope that does not take place. I hope that the owners of the property, the company's named Sidewinder, I hope they can find an alternative use that's economic for them. And as a county commissioner, I'm happy to help them find an alternative use. We can work with Jefferson County Development Authority so they can make a profit. They can find a viable business that works for them that's different from this plan that was rejected.
Commissioner Keys?
Yeah, so I did lead the vote to deny the application, and the zoning ordinances I referenced in my denial was 1.1, 4.4C, 1.3D of our zoning ordinance, as well as our subdivision regulations. And so it's important that, as planning commissioners, we follow our interpretation of our zoning ordinance, our subdivision regulations, and keep the welfare of our county in mind. So they're all encompassing. And it was a unanimous decision. And but as President Majdi said, we
you
want
can just say
to
Pasha. It's cool.
Pasha, I know. As Pasha said,
I do like the formality.
I know.
I like that as well.
Yeah. Well, we told our son, actually, what does he call you? His Majesty. We made a funny joke, and he's 8, and he still calls. We said he has to bow, and it's like this funny thing.
Genuflect when he walks in the room.
Yeah, he has no idea we're just messing with him.
We don't need to do that. No.
Bill has those same requirements here.
Your Majesty. Yeah, but it's important that we're both. There's two ends of this: protecting our county and listening to our constituents, but also following our zoning ordinance and ensuring that we're not just looking at our current generation, but future generations.
What is the relationship between the planning committee and the county commission? How do they operate separately or together?
The planning commission by law is entrusted with the responsibility of making non-political decisions like this one. Mm-hmm. We don't want these decisions to be political. They have to be in accordance with the law. And that's why the state has set up county governments with a separate planning commission. There is one twist to it in that the county commission sends a representative to the planning commission. See, even I'm getting tongue-tied. Mm-hmm. There's 2 commissions here.
Right.
The county commission sends a representative to the planning commission. There's only 1 seat. And Cara occupies that seat.
But you all also appoint the members to the planning commission, correct?
That's right.
Correct.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no supervisory role.
Sure.
They're independent.
Can the county commission overrule the planning commission?
No.
Unless there was an Article 12 process, a text amendment, then it would be both the County Commission and the Planning Commission working through those text amendments.
Bill,
Yeah,
you about to say?
a few years or so ago, Berkeley County was looking at zoning as well. I was thinking at that time there was going to be a separate zoning commission that would work parallel to the planning commission. That's obviously not the case in Jefferson County. You have the zoning considerations under the planning commission. Is that correct?
No, we have a board of zoning appeals, and they make
BZA.
independent decisions, and they are a quasi judicial body.
Okay, then why would not this this act last week fall into the zoning?
So
board.
BZA, they're mainly with conditional use permits. So if a property is zoned conditional use, they would have to go to the BZA in order to make it a permitted use, and so they have that's a large part of their, not their only authority, but a big part of their authority. So with the solar farming, so that's a conditional use. In order to make it a permitted use, they have to first go to the BZA, and then it brings it into the framework, and then it comes to the Planning Commission for concept and site plan approval. But we are it's written in our subdivision regulations 23-300. Planning Commission shall be the agency overseeing the review of subdivisions and site development.
Okay. Yeah, let me go back to a point you raised earlier, Pasha, and it was kind of you did not mean as a throwaway comment, but a lot of folks would interpret this, and that's having the state come in and give you some guidance on the water and water resources.
Right.
Unfortunately, in karst topography, that is no trivial task. And I do not believe that the state has done a thorough survey in any county. They've probably done more in Berkeley County than any other county going back a few years or so ago, but still that only scratched the surface. How do you anticipate to get enough attention and get enough dollars available to do a thorough survey of water resources and to a lesser degree water quality within the county? It's something, it's aspirational, something everybody wants to do, but to actually make it happen is no trivial task at all.
It's no trivial task. It is expensive. We had a presentation from USGS, U.S. Geological Survey. It's a federal agency that does these studies. Marty Kozar, who's an expert and knows Jefferson County real well, he's based down in Charleston.
Yes.
He came and gave a presentation so you could do a basic study that does X, you could do an advanced study that does Y. The advanced study was about $800,000. I mean, it's expensive. Yeah. It's a type of line item that there's no chance it could ever fit into a county budget. I mean, we could never afford something like that. The $100,000 study, that's something we could talk about. We could work with Berkeley because it's going to affect Berkeley too because of the karst topography that you mentioned.
Not really.
Not really?
Not really. No, they're kind of standalone. Within the county, there are various regions. They don't really have a lot of communication unless there is what I call a conduit from one to the other.
Okay.
The diffuse flow does not. Go back to Marty Kozar. I've worked with Marty for 25 years.
Oh, okay.
One of the very best. He is really, really good. So
very sharp.
Marty, he's very good.
He gave a great presentation, and we said, well, we're going to inquire about this, and that's what that recent letter was about. We sent that to DEP, specifically the Department of Water and Waste Management, and we asked them, can you give us some more information about what you're doing to study this? Because this is very important. I've been very careful to not ask them to do the study, because my posture is it's their responsibility, so I don't need to ask. It's their responsibility under state law. So the way we wrote the letter was to ask for an update on a responsibility that they already have. They're required to do this.
Our guests in the studio, Pasha Majdi and Cara from the Jefferson County Commission. Jefferson County first. What does that mean? And in practicality, what's it going to do for Jefferson County?
Jefferson County first. We just passed a resolution saying economic development in Jefferson County should serve Jefferson County residents first. This came from a discussion about a transmission line that is under consideration from PJM and the authorities that make decisions on where utility serving transmission lines will go. This is the big power lines, not the telephone poles in your neighborhood, but the big ones where you drive by on the highway and say, what's that? What's that big thing over there? That's a transmission line.
Right. How wide of a right-of-way do those lines need?
I don't know precisely. One thing, we talked about this when I was on your show a few months ago.
Yes.
Somebody posted on Facebook, I heard it's 2 miles. It's not 2 miles. That is the my understanding. I'm not an expert, but that's the possible areas where they could expand it. So out of a possible 2 mile width, they can expand it X amount, and the amount X is I think it's a couple hundred feet or something like that. So very different from 2 miles. But if you're a farmer and you own a farm right next to that easement, that right of way, 200 feet onto your property could eat up your whole farm.
And
so this is a very serious problem for our local
residents.
farmers.
There's a lot of residents concerned because they could eat up their house. You know, it's condemnations. In this case, it would be devastating impacts on our county. All for Loudoun County.
Yeah, and that's the reason we brought it up. Thanks for bringing that up, Cara, because who benefits economically from this transmission line? It's those who produce the power, which is a good thing. That's Southwest Virginia. But it's those who consume the power in Loudoun County. And they just traverse over our county land, seizing people's property for the economic benefit in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars for Loudoun County. What do we get? Nothing.
And these are mainly for data centers, as I understand?
Yes. Yeah.
And they have a lot of those in Loudoun County.
They do. They're the data center capital of the world. Isn't that right, Cara?
Yes, and that's part of why they need more power is because they're at capacity, and so they're trying to get more power in. So having these added lines would help them for their county.
And they can't generate enough of the power in Virginia at their nuclear power plant or through any other means?
Not that I know of. They probably have a clean energy standard, and they're probably not meeting their power demand, so they're using coal power from West Virginia and saying, "Oh, don't look at this. This is just this is from across the line. Doesn't count."
So, what's the county commission's authority in regards to these transmission lines?
Authority, not too much.
Not too much?
Not too much. But we're hoping we can be influential by voicing the opinions of our residents.
Right.
Influential to who? Public Service Commission? West Virginia Public Service Commission?
Public Service Commission has oversight to a small degree, but I think the decisions, and we asked folks at the state level if they could come in and brief us on this. Do they have a decision-making authority? And they said no. So this would be Chairman Linville of the in the House of Delegates. He's chairman of the committee with oversight over the Public Service Commission. He said they don't have a lot of decisions. It's mainly at the federal level.
Yeah, PJM. Is that a federal body or who oversees all the transmission lines?
It's hard to define. It's a regional decision-making authority for the bulk power system, as it's called, the system for delivering power, electricity throughout the United States. And I think it's quasi-governmental, if I understand.
And what influence does West Virginia Public Service Commission have with them?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
So let me kind of circle around to where I'm trying to go. You have a concern. You as a county commission represent your constituents by voicing your concern, and you'll voice it first through the Public Service Commission, PSC, and then encourage them to do what after that?
Well, we've said twice now, once in a letter to PJM and then second through the Jefferson County First resolution, that we oppose the building of this transmission line. So that's our opinion. We oppose it. We bring in $876 million spent in Jefferson County for tourism. And building a transmission line over our lands does not help that. That's our economic engine.
But does it hurt it? Does it hurt it? To me, that is kind of even though it's argument very near and dear to you,
right.
I don't think that's a compelling argument.
Okay. Do
you have a compelling argument that you can go to PSC?
So one of the major flaws with their proposed area is these are growth areas in our county. You know, subdivisions that are still being developed right now. High density. This is solar farms. Ironically, could be wiped out by this development, by the widening, because it's along those corridors. So these are major corridors in our county that have grown and are trending to continue to grow and are supported by our comprehensive plan for growth areas. So when you have a huge easement that would wipe that out, that's a financial impact on our county.
Okay, I thought where you're going were the developments, the developments throughout the county. There has been an argument put forward in years past. There is a health issue that's associated with transmission lines. Has that been verified? Is that an argument still being used? Or is that an argument that's been used in the past that's no longer valid?
I've heard it. I'm not familiar with it. I haven't studied it.
But it worked quite well in Berkeley County 20 years or so ago when they were looking at the same problem here. And there was enough concern about the health issue that the Public Service Commission backed off.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
See, this is why I like coming on this show. I always learn something from
Yeah,
Mr. Stubblefield. That's
and I
great.
think this line, from what I've been told, they haven't laid out specific parcels yet, so it could vary. That 2-mile range that Pasha had said. But South Jefferson Elementary School, I believe, is an area of potential impact as well. So when you talk about the health, you have to also look at an entire school that could be impacted.
first you've got to sort out how valid is a health concern.
Right.
And there's been pros and cons, and I've been away from this discussion for quite a while. I don't know where the science leads us now.
Right.
But if there's, to me, that is a more valid argument than the fact that you're going to disrupt the 200 feet of somebody's farm. That's right.
And Bill, I think that's exactly where you need to be going with that. And I agree with you. There's probably not any data that's going to show that it's counterproductive to tourism, but it would be to farmland,
and
it would be to building,
and
people,
schools,
and schools, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I
and
think
these are highly populated areas. So when you're, potentially financially devastating these areas, but also the health,
right,
potentially.
Somebody in our comment section asked if these lines could go underground.
They could, but it's too expensive, is what the counter argument is.
Technically feasible, not economically feasible.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. Again, my numbers are dated. I cannot speak to it. But a few years or so ago, for putting something underground in karst topography is over $1 million per mile. Yeah. And that, I think, is probably much conservative, very conservative now. So it is a huge economic impact.
Well, speaking of economic impact, our resolution, Jefferson County First, posed the question, all right, if this is going to be built against our opposition, then what? And we said, well, we need to start looking at economic development that takes advantage of these lines. It's not something we want. We're fighting against it. We've said twice publicly we're against it. But like you all pointed out, we're not the decision makers here. This is done at the federal level. So if they're going to traverse over our lands, then at least we should make some of the economic benefit from it instead of all the money going to Loudoun County. So that's something we're going to have to look at over the next 5
What are your
10
options?
years. We could do our own data centers here. We'd have to look at the zoning and look at our comprehensive plan and see how that works. We could do other types of development that benefit from that power and use that power.
As they run those lines through, obviously there's no, I'm not sure what the appropriate wording would be, but there's no substation along the way to download that power to make it local. It's something you have to add after the fact. Can it be added after the fact if indeed these do come to fruition?
I think it can, yes.
Yeah. Circling back around to Public Service Commission, again, I think that you as a voice, regardless how eloquent you are and how much passion you have, you're kind of a tertiary voice in the wilderness. Someone that has more of an impact would be the West Virginia Public Service Commission. Mm-hmm. Right. Have you talked to Charlotte Lane? Have you talked to anybody in Public Service Commission to see if they will become an active champion for you?
We've talked to Delegate Linville, who's chairman of the committee with oversight over
He's
the
not
PSC.
Public Service Committee. He's with the legislators.
Right.
So
we went to the oversight committee because he's elected. So that's my first option. But if you're recommending we go straight to the PSC, that's another thing to do.
I'd go sit down with Charlotte Lane at Public Service Commission and try to get them to become a champion for you because they have more muscle than you have.
Right. They definitely do on this one. That's for sure.
And I'm not sure on the federal level how much of a state legislator influence they have, but in the Public Service Commission a lot more so.
And in matters of eminent domain, how successful are those in large projects like these? I tend to believe that they're very successful.
From the transmission lines perspective, is successful.
Yes.
Yes, they're going to win that.
Yeah, so that would include private property along the way, not just farms, but potentially wiping out houses. So you'd be forced to sell your home, then they level it and bring power lines through. I'm assuming that's a last resort for the power company.
It is, but in the areas that their lines are going through, there's no way around it. If that's the area that the current lines are, it will go into developments.
No matter what route you take, it's going to affect.
It's going to affect
large amounts of people.
Large amounts of people, and that's what's alarming to our constituents. And I got to give credit to the folks that came out and spoke and thank you, Pasha, for pulling them into our county commission meeting to do a presentation. They understand the mechanisms of PJM and where these impacts would potentially happen with the existing power lines. And so when you look at it in GIS, you can see firsthand where it's going to impact, and it's alarming. It's not just farms, it's high density, it's a lot of folks. And eminent domain, speaking as an appraiser, that could take years of litigation to be justly compensated. So you may have just built a single family or a townhome, and you've put $350,000 into it. It may take years for you to get that just compensation back.
That's rough.
Not only from the physical sense, but let's go back to the health sense.
Right.
Nobody really knows that particular house, even though it still remain as a house, is there going to be some health effect on the kids?
Right.
In the long term.
Right.
In the long
Right.
term, yeah, exactly.
Right.
In West Virginia, correct me if I'm wrong here, because this is your profession, but in West Virginia, I believe historically, we have a really bad track record for eminent domain in terms of just compensation. We'll throw a couple bucks at you and hope that the whole
Right.
thing goes away.
Exactly.
Not fair compensation, not market value. It should be market value. And if we keep going down this path, if this line is built and our citizens' property is seized for this, as a commissioner, I'm going to try and find some sort of way to help these folks out so they, at the very least, get market value.
I can't imagine. First off, I'd be interested to know how many homes are in the path of this transmission line. I can't imagine that this will be taken sitting down.
No.
This is and the lawsuits on this alone would stall the eminent domain procedure, would they not, Cara?
It's
Because if
potentially.
if you're wiping up my neighborhood, I'm going to guess we're going to get a pretty good attorney, and we're going to fight this as long as we possibly
yeah,
can.
and a lot of these are new neighborhoods
Yeah.
that are actively still being built.
Yeah, and if you're buying a new house, you're probably upside down for a little while there.
Yeah.
So between the closing costs and whatever.
To kind of circle around and bring to closure, I am not familiar, and this is your area, not mine. I'm not familiar with a transmission line going through any neighborhood and wiping out and tearing down the houses. They will make every effort to skirt the neighborhood, and then that comes up.
But Cara, we just brought that point up, but Cara just said there's no way to avoid it.
Yeah, and 340 is an example. There was a new neighborhood, semi-new. Those homes got wiped out.
Well, we did this in Berkeley County a few years or so ago. The line never came through because of pushback, but they made a tremendous effort to skirt all the neighborhoods. They were able to skirt
And that's
around.
that 2-mile wiggle room that we were talking about.
yeah.
But the problem is that it has to be on one side or another, and it will be very complicated when you have development on both sides. And so some of these areas, that's the problem.
Unless they start their circular path much earlier,
Right.
and bypass it altogether.
Right, which is possible.
Well, thank you both for coming in. This is fascinating stuff. We should get an eminent domain attorney on the
I know,
program here.
I know.
Bill. And in all seriousness, just to find out
should.
more about eminent domain, because I think most people would be very shocked to find out after they build a house, raise kids in it, that they can be taken from them like that because of a decision made in a court. Thank you both.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Cara Keys, Pasha Majdi.